Alligator Alcatraz. There is only one road leading in, and the only way out is a one-way flight. This is an efficient and low-cost way to help carry out the largest mass deportation campaign in American history.
Now, a lot of that, as you might expect, was lies. It's not low cost operating. That was going to cost something like $500 million a year. It was an incredibly expensive way to carry out your mass deportation plan. And the only reason they did it at all was to appeal to right-wing bloodlust. They liked the idea that like maybe an alligator is going to eat somebody. Remember that? It was a lot of fun. And then Charlie Kirk was tragically killed and we were told that we're bloodthirsty. You guys were spreading memes of alligators chasing immigrants. Do you remember that? That was 2 weeks ago. Anyway, so that was all a lie. But some of it was sort of true. She talked about one-way plane trips. And it turns out some of those might have been one-way plane trips, but not out. Some people might have had a one-way plane trip to Alligator Alcatraz because it turns out now that there's a lot of people who are oopsie-daisy missing. And we have no idea where they are. They evidently went to this concentration camp. And now we don't know. Maybe they're there, maybe they're not. Maybe they were deported. There doesn't seem to be paperwork for literally anything. And so there's this report the Miami Herald put together could not determine the whereabouts of nearly 2/3 of the 1,800 men brought to the facility during just the month of July. Around 800 detainees showed no record in ICE's database, and more than 450 detainees listed no location and were only instructed to call ICE for details. And I don't know why the Miami Herald is complaining. I'm sure when you call ICE, they're very helpful. Now, some of these people could potentially be at this concentration camp. It's just hard to know because Florida cares so little about these people's lives that they don't basically do any record keeping. So unlike federal facilities, the Everglades Detention Center is run by the state of Florida, and they don't maintain a searchable database of people detained at the facility. Now, why would you have the database? Well, if you acknowledge that these are human beings who have family members, friends, spouses, children, and those people might want to at least know where their family member is being held, then you would do the database. If you consider them less than fully human and you don't care if their family's just wondering where they've been disappeared to, then whatever, you don't need that thing. Florida's very clear where they stand on this. But to be clear, that alone would not have accounted for all of the detainees without records in the federal database, as the facility's population has declined rapidly by late August because of some court rulings, falling below 400 people due to a federal court ruling essentially halting operations at the site. So the lack of a database does not answer all of this. There's still many people that are as yet unaccounted for. So another potential explanation is that they have been deported. The issue with that is the majority of those that were at this facility had not received final deportation orders from a judge. So if they've been deported, first of all, there should be some record of that, in the same way that a family member might want to know if a person is at the facility. It might be nice for them to know what country their family member has been sent to. But importantly, if they've been deported, then the law has been broken, potentially tens or hundreds of times. Nobody would be surprised by that. It's Florida, but we should probably figure that out so that we can sue at some point. Hopefully we can find out about that. And that was, by the way, that was July. Now, as we said, the population has rapidly fallen because a judge had said you have to shut down the facility. Bear in mind, an appeals court has now overturned that. And as of right now, this concentration camp can continue to function, which means more people are going to be sent there, which means more people can be disappeared. Maybe they're being sent to Sudan. Maybe they're being sent to El Salvador. Maybe they're being shot in the back of the head and thrown in the Everglades somewhere. Again, I don't want to assume that that's what it is, but when hundreds of people that the state does not give a damn about suddenly disappear, it leads people to wonder. And you'll notice, by the way, this story, we didn't jump on this instantly when it came out. I was sort of hoping that Florida would pretend to care. They'd say something about this. I haven't seen any update from them. They don't seem to care that you come away from this with the conclusion that these people are all dead, that their bodies are just somewhere hidden in the Everglades. And so as of right now, we don't know. Hopefully there will be some sort of inquiry, a judge will get involved, because again, as much as DeSantis or Trump or Noem might want to deny the humanity of these individuals, we still acknowledge it. And the vast majority of these people have committed no crimes whatsoever. But it's possible that crimes have been committed against them by our government. And that said, let's turn now to prior crimes that have been conducted not only just by the Trump administration. Let's jump now to this. If left unchecked, and unfortunately right now it is mostly unchecked, the federal government will roll over every right that you have, or at least that you think you have, because in practice, you might well not. And it is not just the Trump administration that cannot be trusted in this way. There is this new report about what the DHS and Border Patrol, ICE, all of that has been doing in terms of your privacy. And this goes back way before Donald Trump was brought back into office. DNA was apparently collected between 2020 and 2024 by DHS. It was shared with the FBI. And we're only finding out about this because of Georgetown. Their Center of Privacy and Technology has taken a look at some data that was released by US Customs and Border Protection. CBP officers apparently took genetic material from some citizens as young as 14. And again, citizens. Now, look, I think it's really strange for you to just be mass collecting the genetic material and DNA of migrants or undocumented people or whatever. But this is also United States goddamn citizens that are having their genetic material taken. In many cases, no notice given to them. They're entered into federal databases. Again, no notice that that's happening. And it's just sitting there, and it's been done for years at this point. About 2,000 US citizens' DNA was collected in this way. 2,000 US citizens, let alone all of the other non-citizens who were abused in this way. Here is one example of how this worked in practice. In March 2021, again, this is under President Biden, by the way. A 25-year-old US citizen was traveling through Chicago's Midway Airport when they were stopped by US Border Patrol agents. Though charged with no crime, the 25-year-old was subjected to a cheek swab to collect their DNA, which was sent to the FBI. Their DNA was added to the FBI's database of genetic material, despite the lack of criminal charges. So there was no cause for this whatsoever. I don't believe that in this particular case there was any notice. And think about it, many of you probably have gone through Midway Airport. I know I've flown through Midway before. I'm a US citizen. There's no reason to believe that I would be any better protected than anyone else. Obviously, racism is a big part of this. I guess that could play a part as well. But 2,000 US citizens have been abused in this particular way. So you're probably wondering, where is this data going? What's this database that we're talking about? It's apparently the CODIS database. It's the one from cop shows that's generally used to store information about convicted criminals. You know, in case people get out or whatever, you can track them, networking, all that stuff. But again, they're not just putting convicted criminals in there. They're not even just putting accused criminals in there. They're putting the data from US citizens that have been accused and charged of no crime whatsoever. Thousands of US citizens, and also evidently, basically every detained migrant for years has been added to this database. So this is according to a May 2024 report, again, run through the data by Georgetown Center on Privacy and Technology. They found that CBP has been collecting the DNA information of every migrant they've detained. Border Patrol has also collected and shared the DNA information on migrant children, according to the agency's data. Initial estimates show that the sensitive genetic information of about 133,000 teens and children was being uploaded and stored in this federal criminal database for the rest of time, basically. There is no sunset on this. It just goes on and on and on, your information. And why should we be concerned about this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, it's your genetic material. Why would you let any government, even if it was an administration that you agree with, collect that information, particularly if you haven't been charged of a crime, particularly if you don't even know that it's going there? But there are other issues too. DNA data can reveal incredibly sensitive information, including a person's genetic relations and information about those relatives, regardless of their citizenship status. The information accessible in a criminal database used to investigate suspects of crime could subject people to investigations that they would otherwise not be swept up in. And bear in mind, some people who are ready to just hand over their rights, their liberties on a silver platter to the federal government for some abstract guarantee of safety or security, they might not be concerned about this. You are not allowed to just sweep up massive amounts of data and then accuse people of crimes based on that. You're supposed to have something called probable cause. And you just being in Midway Airport or being in detention is not probable cause for literally any crime CBP or later on the FBI or a local, police department or whatever might want to investigate you for. You are supposed to be protected against this. We would have assumed prior to this reporting that you were being protected against this, but you were not. And while sure, I'm more worried about the data being abused under the Trump administration, this did not begin under the Trump administration. That database needs to be purged. Every US citizen at the very least needs to have their information taken out of that. And I also believe they should be compensated for their rights and their civil liberties being abused by the federal government in this way. Every one of those 2,000 US citizens should be paid by the federal government for their rights being abused. And whoever okayed this, whether it's the leadership at CBP, whether it's the agents that were taking and then storing the information on the ground that knew that they shouldn't, there should be criminal charges filed over this. I don't have any faith whatsoever that they will, but if there was justice, that's the direction we'd go in.